Hey y'all, Zelda here. I am coming to you with a week ahead pick a skull, a dragon skull reading. It's a 3 card reading. So, how it works is that I'm going to show you 3 different skulls. You're going to pick the one that resonates most with you, and then you will skip ahead. I'll put the timestamps in the description box for you. You'll skip ahead to the reading that calls most to you, and you'll get a little reading. Of course, you can watch this at any time. Use your intuition to pick the one that is best for you. However, my intention is in making these weekly is to have like a more updated, timely message for you to kind of like continue evolving and developing with that. So let's look at the different decks that we're going to be using. The first of the 3 decks is going to be the Prairie Majesty Oracle deck. I really love this deck. Backed on Kickstarter, it's got, as you can see, like a word that corresponds with like an animal or a plant, and that has like a question for reflection, which is really, really it's really thoughtful. I really like them. I think that they kind of work like intentions in that way. And the second deck is the Moon Power Tarot. This is the tarot deck that we're going to be using for this week. This was one of the first ever tarot decks that I got that I really deeply connected to. So I always really love using a lot of these ones this week are like some of my favorite decks. And then the last one is the Universal Dragon Oracle. The art is just really beautiful. It has a word, a dragon, and then we'll see what messages the skulls have for you as well. So if you are ready, we're going to do the skulls. So pile number 1 is going to be this really gemmy rose quartz, so high quality. You can see that like stunning clarity. So this dragon is carved by Leandro de Souza. All of the carvings this week are dragons carved by Leandro. She's made of rose quartz. Her name is Kyoko. So if Kyoko resonates, that's pile number 1. Pile number 2, like I said, also carved by Leandro. This is a lemurian quartz, and his name is Mirin. So if Mirin resonates with you, that's pile number 2. And pile number 3, this is also carved by Leandro de Souza, as I mentioned. This is an ametrine dragon, which is amethyst and citrine. You can see that kind of zoning a little bit there. And her name is Jaya. So if Jaya resonates with you, that is pile number 3. So you can either skip directly ahead from here to your desired time-stamped reading, or you can stay with me for a moment. We're going to sit, tune in, and call in some of our guides. So I'm going to spritz some Golden Sphinx Aura Mist. I really like using this one for the readings. It helps tap into Akashic records, answer questions, the wisdom of the Sphinx. I call upon all of my guides, ancestors, teams, and lineages. And the guides, ancestors, teams, and lineages of every individual watching this. I invite the wisdom of our past, present, and future selves from this and every timeline. I implore that each individual will utilize their sacred power of discernment to know which messages are meant for them and which ones they can leave behind. And I express humble gratitude for the guides and spirits who work with me and through me to offer these messages to the collective. Okay, if you are still here, let's get into pile number 1. So if you chose pile number 1, you're resonating with Kyoko. I feel like the camera always washes out how beautiful rose quartz is, but if you've ever worked with rose quartz, it has this very like soft, loving energy, and Kyoko very much has that energy. Let's look at the cards and we'll tune in with Kyoko. Of course, she's going to be here. Okay, perfect. So I don't ever look at the cards before I do the reading with you. So if you see me like pause or sit, it's because I'm just like taking in the information. But I'm going to show you the cards first, then we'll sit and do a little bit of interpretation and see what messages Kyoko has to share. So the tarot card is the 8 of Swords. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but it is thundering here, and it just like boomed so loud that the walls shook a little bit. The Universal Dragon Oracle is change perspective. And the Prairie Majesty Oracle is the Killdeer. It says strut. And the question is, am I carrying myself with love? Am I carrying myself with love? Now, when I see these cards, I smiled and said perfect, because I decided to share the cards first since I hadn't seen them yet, and I didn't want to just kind of like launch in and without knowing what her message was. But Kyoko is a dragon who very much loves working with the inner child, loves working with healing wounds from childhood, loves working with different parts of self, particularly younger parts, and is also deeply connected to the Fae realm, loves working with Fae energy. When I see these cards together, a big through line, like this changing perspective in the middle, and seeing the 8 of Swords. One of the things that I notice with the 8 of Swords are the stories that I am operating from, are the stories that I'm telling myself, that I'm living my life from, are they keeping me feeling really trapped? This being is like wrapped in wires and has like this little kind of game playing on here, and they're like wound around her, and there are swords all around her. And it feels very much like tangled up in our own narratives. Like the swords are the element of air, and they are also they're kind of like our neuroscience, almost like our nervous system, the wiring of our brains, the stories we tell ourselves, the thoughts that we have, our cognitive capacity. And in here, there can be this feeling of like almost being trapped in that, but it is a transformation. And this feels very aligned with the changing perspective, that there's going to be some sort of like, I even see this, right? Like the 8. So it's the 8 of Swords. And I see this kind of like 8 forming this like infinity sign on all of these different angles. And it just feels like going in and really like alchemizing a lot of the energy that you are receiving from some of the stories or truths that maybe are asking to be uprooted right now. One of the things that I'm hoping to talk about in each reading is how we are in this kind of Lion's Gate portal energy starting today, but that is very much like we're moving through that. There's like a call to release a lot of fear in the stories. There's a call to step into elevated versions of self, elevated timelines, if that language resonates with you. And so when I see this strut, I think about the solar plexus, and I think about how obstacles to like, and I also see this like sun basically, and I just think of that like solar energy. This being is like curled around that. They're curled around their core, kind of like clenched up and in like the fetal position, really. And there feels very much like this quality of how shame can be a big piece of what inhibits us from fully radiating our solar energy. And I say this not as someone who has figured this all out, actually, but as someone who actually has been deeply working with my solar plexus energy these days. And so I say this from a deep place of tenderness and like personal affection, in the curiosity of like, is your sense of shame holding you back? Where do you need to like apply a lens of forgiveness, of self-celebration, of forgiving yourself? And sometimes this doesn't mean that we blame ourselves. Like, for instance, and this could be a trigger, so I want to identify. I'm not going to speak in depth about it, but I am going to talk about sexual trauma, just kind of vaguely. No more detailed than that. But what could happen, right, if we experience something like a sexual trauma, is that even if we don't blame ourselves, because it's very important to not blame someone who's kind of the victim of someone else. But in order to kind of reclaim that power for ourselves, sometimes we blame ourselves because we feel more in control that way, and or we hold shame, or we hold some sort of personal responsibility. And the real personal responsibility can come with a lens of self-forgiveness, of like unconditional self-love and self-care in those moments. And honestly, this quality of like, am I carrying myself with love, feels like it really invites like, where are the blocks? Where are the stories that are keeping us super bound, stuck? And in this, and it doesn't have to apply to sexual trauma. It could be any trauma, but it also, and we all have some level of trauma in our life, but it also could apply to just like stories around, one that's coming to mind is like, if I didn't motivate myself by saying negative things, like, if I don't do this, I'm a failure, or I never do this in time, then I would just not do anything. I would just, if I didn't motivate myself negatively, I would be lazy. I would never accomplish anything. When the reality is that we actually even like scientifically know that that is not human nature. Human nature is not to just like languish and be lazy. There are like innate human desires to move towards like contributing to the world and creating and having a sense of purpose. And there are like all sorts of sense of meaning in these ways. And so like, what negative ways do you talk to yourself, and how does that feel like it's kind of feeding? This feels very much like one of those like finger traps where like when you pull really hard, you can't get your fingers out. I actually don't really like those traps. They increase anxiety, right? Or they increase fear. It's like if you struggle, it makes things tighter. But being able to like relax and breathe through that means that you can kind of like shed that layer, or like remove your fingers from that little trap, the finger trap, right? So by changing your perspective and embodying yourself more in this way, I get the sense that there is also a way that you can tap into outside guidance. I'm really drawn to Canine, good old Canine, who is there to support you, to help you. And I'm just thinking of like, Kyoko is very much a guide that supports the inner child work. Like, she has this energy of, you don't have to do it alone. You don't have to isolate yourself in this process. You can ask for help. You can ask for help from fellow humans, from friends, from a therapist or a professional processor. You can ask for help from like people who have come before you by like engaging with like texts or reading stories of other people who have gone through what you've gone through, and have kind of like felt empowered and found ways to heal themselves. You can also ask for help from your ancestors, from your spirit guides, from your spirits, your benevolent spirits that kind of work for your highest and best, whatever that means to you, whether that is nature spirits and energy, whether that is, we're working a lot this week with dragons, whether that is some dragon energy, whether that is like an animal that is powerful for you and feels aligned with connecting with your own sense of quality, whether it's connecting with archetypes. There's so many ways to seek external support. And the narrative even of I have to do this alone, or I won't be able to do this and I'll be a burden on those around me. You know, there's all sorts of things that keep us isolated, but I'm getting the sense that that is not going to be supportive at this time, that it's really important to connect to the resources that we have available, including the beings that are there to help and guide us. And that is the message that I'm hearing really loud and clear from Kyoko right now, is like, you're not alone. How can you change your perspective? That includes changing the positioning of yourself. Like if you always sit in a certain place, getting up and sitting somewhere else and doing that thing in a different way, like switching things up, changing perspective can have that quality too. Strut also makes me think of like when we feel shame, sometimes we want to like collapse. So how can you even like hold yourself in your body with a sense of confidence and courageousness? And I feel Kyoko here almost like the beautiful smell of like fresh flowers, or the sun warming your skin when you're feeling like chilled to the bone. And just this feeling of like support, love, affection is there for you if you open yourself up to receive it. And that is a very difficult, complex thing to do, but that is the work for you right now, is actually opening yourself to that nourishment, seeking that out, and supporting yourself in shifting these narratives so that you can carry yourself with more love. I think that's your message, Group 1. I hope that you have a really beautiful week. Thank you so much for being here. If you would like to gather more this week, I do have an event for the full moon this Thursday, the 11th. It will be a divine heart liberation theme. We will do a collective tarot reading, receive Reiki, and divine crystalline DNA activation. So that will be on Thursday. You can find the information for that in the description. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you next week for the week ahead. Okay. Group 2, welcome. If you are in Group 2, you chose Mirin. Funny story about Mirin is that I actually loved him so much. He was the highest paid invoice prize at a crystal sale. And I ended up getting way more crystals than I expected because I could not have Mirin come home. I like was already so deeply connected. He like told me his name on the live. So if you chose Mirin and were feeling deeply connected to him immediately, you are not alone. Okay, Group 2, let's see your cards. The tarot card is the Hierophant. Your dragon card is Flow. And your Prairie Majesty Oracle, the like element is prairie soil. The word is hold. And the question is, what riches do I carry within? So I feel really connected to this quality of like riches, like the word riches and rich, and how that like feels and tastes, like the decadence of that, but also like because it's soil, like the mineral quality, the like micro quality that kind of like taps into the larger system. And it's interesting to see this in combination, and this is just like the feeling that I'm having is or I guess the feeling that I'm having, the message, the intuition, the message that I'm receiving, these are all different ways of saying the same thing sometimes, is around the Hierophant as this like reclamation of agency, a reclamation of expertise and knowing what you know, and like really turning inwards to yourself. When I think of flow with this card, what comes to mind is the phenomena of flow state, which if you aren't aware of flow state research, this is something that I think oftentimes feels very like, yeah, of course, when people hear it, but it's a very interesting thing that they've done research on, which is that they've done it on, I think, expert athletes and actually other people who've built expertise in something, like artists, will describe this state of flow where they are not in like a thinking through mind state, but things are more fluid. There's a sense of like no time and no space, and they're able to do things. They don't have a sense of fear, and they don't like overthink things. This feels like getting in the groove, being in the flow is language you hear people describe this with. But this comes, it's very difficult to get in the flow if you don't have a certain level of expertise in something where you can do something fluidly, where you can do something without like thinking about it explicitly. It's kind of like if you start cooking and you've never cooked before in your life, you might feel like uncomfortable. Like, what does this do? What does this do? Like, trying to follow the recipe exactly. But if you are a cook that cooks often and you kind of get an idea, it can feel more like an artistry experience. You can kind of, improvise a little bit. You can kind of like taste something and start piecing things together. And it doesn't feel as much like a thinking process. I mean, it's okay. This doesn't, like I said, always take what messages resonate and leave the rest. It doesn't have to be cooking for you. It could be something different. But when I think of the Hierophant, this is a card that has so often throughout history, relatively recent history, in terms of like, well, let's just say modern history, right? History that we all kind of agree upon, that's taught in schools, that kind of thing. This, in terms of tarot history, has been represented by like a figure of authority, like a religious figure of authority, kind of like a pope or something like that. Or in one deck, I know it's like the guru, of like going and consulting with like a higher expert or spiritual counsel. And in this deck, and in many decks now, it's represented more as this kind of like turning to like, this looks like coven wisdom. This looks like magical wisdom and internal like intuition and nature and something deeper within. And I think of how do you kind of go inwards and find your counsel? How do you seek your own counsel? And how do you do that in a way that acknowledges your own expertise so that you can get in the flow and be in a relationship with yourself that is not based on the like thinking through everything explicitly or having to do everything exactly a certain way. When I think of this, like what riches do I carry within and that quality of like enrichment, I think of that reality that we sometimes want to like build skills to be able to be our own greatest expertise. and that's not actually in conflict with this. This is the both and, right? How do we kind of continue to foster our sense of expertise, and how do we acknowledge the expertise that we already have? Because this is actually like an ongoing process that is constantly in development. Even for experts in certain fields, they may be the top of their field. Say it's like a scientist, or it could be a teacher. It could be someone who is an expert at tarot. It could be anything, right? It could be an athlete. This is something that once you get there, that doesn't mean that we just sit and rest and are like, well, I'm the best now, because we are in constant development. We have to stay updated. We can't be stagnant. And so there is that like both and, right? And this also allows us to go inward and not think so much about what it looks like or what other people are thinking about us, but how do we actually are able to acknowledge our own wisdom, learn from that, and construct systems where we can elicit and learn more. This is a complex thinking that I am really like feeling with these cards, is how do we create a stable container for the acquisition of knowledge, for the holding and confidence to express our own expertise. I'm getting the sense that maybe there is like a desire to have like one or the other of these, that you're needing to like reclaim some of your own wisdom, or are in a place where maybe you are seeking a little bit of like supplemental like coursework or something, like a training or a guide, like a mentor, or reading a new text, like that kind of like study type of feeling, that maybe there's actually a balance of these that like you're wanting to kind of integrate and feel into a little bit more deeply. Mirin is a dragon who engages with the Akashic records in a very interesting way. He's named after rice wine, and one of the things that he does is he amplifies. He knows what is needed to turn the volume up, to turn the effectiveness up on almost any type of energy that's happening. And he does this in a way that I don't necessarily understand always cognitively, but it even makes sense for the crystal that he chose. He chose to inhabit lemurian quartz, which is an amplifier. It amplifies the energy of others. And so one of the things that he is sharing, take it or leave it, is that a good teacher, a good mentor, whether you're the one in the mentorship position or someone else is maybe mentoring or providing materials, right? It doesn't have to be one-on-one for you. They're going to know how to elicit the wisdom that is already there and amplify that. And he's really kind of warning against a one-size-fits-all approach to integrating new wisdom and to getting into your flow. That he's asking you to find unique and innovative ways to connect with yourself, and to seek out teachers who really continually elicit that in you and encourage that in you. He says, I wouldn't use the same ingredient to balance every meal. So this is about like refining your palette of what is necessary and seeking out teachers or guidance or supports that are refined in that way, that can be discerning. Discerning is a big question that kind of comes up here. Discerning what is needed, what is necessary, and using your own wisdom and that of others to be able to do that. I think that's your message, group 2. I hope that it's been supportive for you. I hope you have a really beautiful week. If you are interested in connecting more, I do have an event happening this Thursday called Divine Heart Liberation in honor of the full moon in Aquarius. We are close up against Lionsgate. We're going to be doing some powerful Reiki healing, some crystalline DNA activation, and then a collective tarot reading and mediumship messages for the second half of it. You can find the information for that in the bio. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you next week for the week ahead. Okay, group 3, welcome. Welcome, welcome. You chose Jaya. Let's look at your cards and we'll see what messages she has to share. I mean, she chose these cards. I always hold them and let them guide the choosing. So these are all messages from them. Your tarot card is the 10 of Swords. Your Dragon Oracle card is Balance. And the Stink Bug is your animal. Flip is the word. And the question is, how does the situation look and feel from a different view? So when I see these, the 10 of Swords, I mean, we can be honest, this looks a little gruesome. And I don't know, this is not to predict something negative happening. I don't use tarot to do that. That's not something that I do personally with tarot. If I receive a message for something in a personal reading, I will deliver it if it has something to do with the future. But that's not like my special talent or gift. It's like future prediction. However, this can be a powerful mirror for what's going on. Having said that, this doesn't mean that this could just be a small thing, right? Sometimes the 10 of Swords moment can look relatively small. Sometimes it can be very impactful. This is a deep transformation time. The 10s are the ends of cycles. I really like the 10 of Swords. I feel like it is intense Phoenix energy where like the full incineration has happened. And the like baby Phoenix is in the precipice of being born. But it can feel very much like an ending, like a death, not like a death of a person necessarily. That's actually not the energy or the reading that I always like bring with these types of things. I mean more like a death as in like it's fully transforming, and that requires a letting go. It is a complete cycle of a thought process. Swords are cognition. They can be cognitive patterns, stories, ways that you engage with thought, and that is kind of ending. This feels like an awakening of sorts, of like eyes being opened, things being shifted, not looking at something the same anymore. And that can feel very dramatic. Also, when I see flip, like how does the situation look and feel from a different view, that also like speaks to that in a way of like kind of turning something on its head and then needing to like reorient and engage with it in a fully different way. When I see balance, I also am seeing this like circle behind and this kind of coming full circle energy of balance, and also acknowledging that like in this really intense transformative process, it's really important to be balancing that out with like ways to take care of yourself. I'm feeling really guided to look at some of the guidebooks. I don't always feel called, but I feel like Jaya's like, read some more of that. There might be more messages for them. So let's see what the stink bug says. Perception is everything. When we land on our backsides, the world might feel upside down, but is it really? Take a moment to lie quietly wherever you find yourself. Look up. What can you see and understand about yourself from this viewpoint? Our ability to shift lenses goes both ways. If something sends you topsy-turvy, maybe your lesson is remembering that you have the power to reorient. Wiggle your legs, gather your courage, and flip yourself with the flick of a full body flip. Other times we might feel stuck looking in one direction. In that case, create your own plot twist. Shift your approach and swap positions. Maybe this means trying something new, physically moving your body or putting on a pair of rose-colored glasses. Tap into tenacity and determination. Don't give up on yourself. Take whatever time and space you need to get back on your feet. Yeah. This does feel like there can be a bit of feeling knocked down, and that finding of tenacity and the ability to right yourself. But it also feels important, like Jaya's message is kind of coming through, in that an important piece of this is in however your perspective has shifted. The image that I'm having, let's see if we can work it through together, because it's not going to come out immediately correct, I don't think, is that there's an image of like a light switch that like goes on and off. And then there's an image of like a dimmer. And we don't want to like flip-flop, right? This is like a transformational end of a cycle. However, we don't want to, because of that information, completely alter everything and throw everything out. We want to have more of a both and approach rather than an either or. This is like being able to acknowledge, like, I still know everything that I knew then, and I know the parts of that that were erroneous or incorrect. And that doesn't actually erase everything else involved. This is actually a complex concept in some ways, even though it sounds very simple. It's complex to be able to hold opposing things as equally potentially true. But that really feels like some of Jaya's message is to don't throw the baby out with the bathwater is the other thing that I'm hearing, which is always such a silly phrase, but it kind of feels like the bath is over. You don't have to throw everything out. It's like you take the baby out, right? And you just get rid of the water. And you like you can wash something off. And the dimmer switch feels like, okay, I decided I want the lights down, but I still want to be able to see things. And so I can lower it to being dimmer in the room rather than clicking it all the way off. And so this is like allowing yourself to find nuance. And that feels like a big part of what the balance is speaking to, is being able to hold nuance and perspective when making decisions, when finding new ways to think about something, when transforming in this way. The other piece of balance feels like, what do you need to feel safe and secure in transformation, in times of transformation and upheaval? Because this does feel like a card where like a lot of familiarity maybe gets taken away or gets tossed out. Things are different. You need different systems, but that can be a big challenge. That can be our nervous system doesn't love change. As creatures of habit, we want like some homeostasis, we want some comfort, we want some familiarity. And so how do you actually give yourself some of the things that you are needing that are actually supportive for you in your evolutionary process? This could look like rest. This could look like attentive time with loved ones. This could look like time alone. This could look like taking a bath, right? Like this is like what is nurturing and balancing for you. This could be active, like taking a walk. These are the questions that I have of like, how does the situation look and feel from a different view? Yes. But as you are flipped, what are you needing to tend to take care of yourself in the disorientation of that process? And Jaya is very much invites us to be like firm with ourselves as we grow, but also she invites us to bring in this lens of sweetness and delight and care for ourselves. And so the balance also is like, how do you not get rid of that necessity? The book that's coming to mind that you might want to check out is the book Pleasure Activism by Adrienne Marie Brown. Okay. I think that is your message, group 3. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I hope that you have a beautiful week ahead and a transformative time in your Lionsgate moment, that you find all of the balance and perspective shift that you are needing and that it is supportive for you. If you would like to spend some more time together, I do have an event this Thursday, the 11th. It is at 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. It is called Divine Heart Liberation. We will be doing Reiki and crystal and DNA activation and a collective mediumship reading and tarot, using tarot cards, oracle cards, psychomancy, what I normally kind of do, just like a more in-depth experience of what I kind of do during this time. And I would love to have you there if you're at all interested. You can find the information in the description, but otherwise I will see you and all of the other groups next week. If you'd like to be notified, you can always subscribe and then you'll get the notifications when I put those videos out. Thank you again. Bye.